Today I'm going to be reading out for you aloud the brief bio from the Free Encyclopedia of Malcolm Hulke, the composer of the incidental music, the infamous incidental music of this particular serial, The Sea Devils. Malcolm Hulke, 17th of January 1943, 11th of December 2003, was a British composer and experimental electronic musician. He was a member of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, which is based in Maida Vale, London, for 25 years, from 1969 to 1994. Hulke proved somewhat controversial when he joined the workshop, due to his view that radiophonic music should be, in his words, fine art, a philosophy that was not shared by other workshop members at the time. Hulke composed the incidental music for the Doctor Who serial The Sea Devils 1972. It was the second score that the Radiophonic Workshop provided for the series. Hulke produced the music for this serial on the Radiophonic Workshop's EMS Syn-Phi 100 synthesizer. The score is experimental, unusual, and controversial for Doctor Who at the time, with producer Barry Letts insisting that substantial edits be made for the finished program. His score for the serial has been described as startling in its range of obtrusive electronic timbres and relative melodic paucity, mixed music and sound effects, and presented uncomfortable sounds to a substantial early evening audience on Saturdays in a way not duplicated in Britain before or since. The Radiophonic Workshop was not commissioned to produce music again for Doctor Who until 1980, when new producer John Nathan Turner decided to fire regular composer Dudley Simpson and commission music from the workshop instead. Hulke returned to the series to compose the music for the 1982 serial Earthshock. He continued to work on the series on a regular basis until 1986, composing the music for Enlightenment, Resurrection of the Daleks, The Twin Dilemma, Attack of the Cybermen, and Terror of the Vervoids. Hulke composed the 1976 radio piece, August 2026, There Will Come a Soft Rains, based on a short story by Ray Bradbury. Outside his music interests, Hulke was an automobile enthusiast. Over a period of years, he built a Bugatti from a collection of spare and scavenged parts. Now I'll read out aloud this K-Punk blog post from October 10th, 2004. Atonal electrodelia. As the intense, crushing pressure of the start of term recedes, by all accounts the worst ever at the college, don't even start me on how Tony education, Blair is systematically turning all educational institutions in this country into annexes of his Stalinist propaganda regime. I'm delighted to be able to catch up with what's happening on the blogs. Naturally, I wholly approve of the new direction Gutter Breaks has gone in. As Matt rightly pointed out, the MP3 blog can be a lazy and dispiriting format, with sound and text actually delibidinizing one another. Nick, however, uses MP3s not as a substitute for discursive consistency, but as illustrations of his clearly identifiable aesthetic. Predictably, of course, I'm most enthusiastic about Nick's post on the cover art for the Doctor Who target paperbacks of the 70s. Like Nick, any encounters of pre-Pertwee Who mythos I had as a child took place not in those days before VCRs on screen, but virtually in my head, with the books as primitive but hyper-effective SimStim machines. And the MP3 extract of Malcolm Hulke's Sea Devils soundtrack is a stunning reminder of how gone the BBC Radiophonic Workshop were. Nick is right to draw the parallel with Throbbing Gristle. Listening to TG back-to-back with Delia Derbyshire recently, the same thing occurred to me, but you really have to hear the atonal electrodelia of Hulke's soundtrack to believe it. By the way, the Sea Devils, like their terrestrial counterparts, the Silurians, were essentially an appropriation of Lovecraft's mythos. CF The Shadow over Innsmouth especially. If you watch that adventure now, you're struck by the way in which the cold-dubbed electronic swarm sonics dominate, so that the images and dialogue seem like backgrounds to the soundolirium rather than the other way around. This post written while listening to the BBC's excellent CD reconstruction of The Web of Fear. Except, of course, for all its evils, this is the asterisk of his comment upon Tony Blair turning all educational institutions in that country into annexes of his Stalinist propaganda regime. Except, of course, for all its evils, Stalin's regime actually did something, whereas for the anti-productive commissars of derealizing Blairite capital, reality is a distraction from the next PR PowerPoint presentation.